Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Gaming Telecom video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to be starting things out with AMD and Intel, as reports are that AMD will be putting forward their Navi architecture for the updated Kaby G processors. And then we're going to move over to console news, specifically what's following the PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2. Well, both Microsoft and Ubisoft have weighed in on this, so we'll be analysing whether it's going to be more of a streaming device or perhaps a more successive generation of consoles or iterative. Well, with that said, let's start things out with Intel and AMD. So, Intel and AMD working together to create an APU had been talked about for a number of years, but it just never really seemed to get off the ground, and honestly, folks were starting to wonder whether it was just going to be one of those pie-in-the-sky rumours and never really bore any fruit. Well, yeah, it did. It bore an apple tree. Because, of course, now we have Kaby G. AMD created two RX Vega variants for Kaby G. The first has 24 compute units and the second has 20 compute units, and that combined with a base clock of 1063 MHz or 931 MHz and a peak performance of 3.7 teraflops or 2.6 teraflops. That is, of course, if it's boosting up to their maximum capacity of 1190 or 1011. That combined with a rather healthy dose of HBM2, and you have a very capable APU. But of course, Intel have their eyes on the future, especially as AMD themselves are working on their own APUs which actually dwarf the performance of Kaby G. Feng Huang was a recent leak that we covered, and I'll try to remember to link it in the video description, but as a brief reminder, it does use the Vega architecture. However, it features massively improved specifications over that which is found in the Intel APUs. For a start, yes, it's still using Vega, but we see 28 compute units compared to 24 of the higher-end SKUs, and we see it does only use 2 GB of HBM2, but overall, memory bandwidth is considerably higher at 307 GB per second compared to just 204 of the higher-end Vega, of the higher-end Kaby SKUs. So performance naturally goes up in kind as well. So why are Intel and AMD deciding to collaborate once again? Well, I suspect it's just a case of AMD wanting that sweet money. After all, at the end of the day, Intel are going to be paying them. So it certainly makes sense for AMD to leverage that. I mean, after all, they're providing Navi/Vega to the PlayStation 5, they're providing it to the new Xbox, and ultimately, they might as well make that money while they can, because Intel, as we all know, are working on their own discrete graphics chips, and this is possibly a good indicator that Intel don't feel confident, at least right now, that their GPUs are going to be ready in time for those next chips. Given what we know about Arctic Sound and then Jupiter Sound, remember Arctic is coming out first, which is Intel's own discrete graphics chip, as well as the release date of Navi, it's most likely that Intel do not feel confident that Jupiter Sound is going to be ready before Navi. That probably tells us that Jupiter Sound is going to be several months after Navi at the very least. Of course, that's only a theory. It's possible that maybe Intel doesn't feel that they can shrink it down fast enough, or perhaps they don't feel that they've got enough technology for the APU, but in my opinion anyway, it's probably a good indicator that Jupiter Sound is going to come out post-Navi, which at the very least is rather interesting. From my point of view, however, it's kind of a win-win. And without question, Intel as a giant, as a company, have definitely been awoken in the GPU space. We can poke fun at them on the whole 28 core, 5 GHz thing as much as we want, but Intel, they've got a lot of money. I know I'm shocking everyone saying that, but Intel are not poor, they are not broke. There's a reason that Raja Koduri and other folks have actually joined Intel. It's not because they are throwing really good office parties, it's because that they've got the facilities and research budgets to attract the best and the brightest, and those individuals, of course, are going to put all of their talent there. And the second reason is because they're paying really well. So when you do that, you're incentivizing the best minds in the industry. Of course, I'm not saying that the folks working at AMD or Nvidia are, dumb or anything like that. Obviously, that's completely and utterly not the case. And those companies also have incredibly talented individuals. Instead, what I'm simply insinuating is Intel have the budgets, they have the capacity to compete with the best. And it's going to be very interesting how Nvidia and AMD manage to step things up. AMD are promising to be a lot more aggressive when it comes to releasing new GPUs. I did cover this yesterday, so I'll try to remember to link it in the video description. But essentially, the company are going to be trying to release a new GPU annually. Now, obviously, this is not necessarily going to be a new architecture every year or whatever, but they can certainly do other things. It could be a refresh, it could be a die shrink, it could be a tweak here or there. Or, of course, it could be a new architecture, and I suspect Nvidia are going to do much the same. Intel are going to be facing a lot of stiff competition. So, right now, while AMD can make that money from them, they might as well, because they can just pile that money into research and development and just bolster their own company. So it just makes a lot of sense. The PlayStation 5 and the Xbox 2 are pretty much confirmed at this point. We have some preliminary specifications on the PlayStation 5, and we can assume that the new Xbox is going to be quite similar. Supposedly, we're going to be looking at a Zen-based CPU and a Navi-based GPU, plus some other bits and pieces, and who knows, I might do a full in-depth analysis of the PlayStation 5, or once again, whatever it's going to be called, over the next couple of days based upon what we know, and perhaps some conjecture on the type of performance we can be getting out of it. But there's a question, of course. While we know that these machines are certainly going to be physical hardware, they're not going to be streaming orientated. Question, of course, what about the successor to those consoles, the PlayStation 6? Of course, that's going to be a while away yet. I mean, after all, we don't even know the release date of the PlayStation 5, which we can assume is not going to be before, let's say, mid to late 2019, and at this rate is looking more like 2020. But even so, we can certainly imagine 4-5 years into the future, in other words, let's say 2024, 2025, those machines are going to start to look old hat. So what will we see then? Will we see yet another PlayStation system? Will we see another Xbox? Or instead is it going to be more of a streaming service, either a small little device that you plug into your TV, or perhaps just a service on your TV, or what have you? Well, both Microsoft and Ubisoft recently have weighed in. The head honcho of Xbox, Phil Spencer, had a recent interview with Variety, and he said, when asked this very question, "Our focus right now is asking the question, what can Microsoft do for gaming, instead of just how do we stack up against the competition? I care less that people play Minecraft than the Xbox One, but that people play Minecraft no matter what the console or device they have in front of them. Regarding your specific question about console generations, this is why I still see games themselves evolving beyond generations, and I'd like to keep evolving hardware as multi-generational too." Meanwhile, the Ubisoft CEO, Yves Guillemot, had also answered this same question, and he said quite a different answer. "I think that we will see another console generation, but there is a good chance that step by step we will see less and less hardware, and there will be one more console generation, and then after that, it will be streaming." It's fair to say that if you're a console manufacturer, you have a vested interest in keeping people producing games for your platform. That's pretty obvious, right? You don't make most of your money from the hardware sales necessarily, especially of the console. You make it either from the ecosystem, so in other words, the PlayStation Network costs, or Xbox Live, or even peripherals as well, and of course the licensing fees that games developers, or should I say publishers, pay to have their game on your platform. And they're not unique there. Steam also takes a fairly big chunk of cash out of every sale on its platform. That's one of the reasons that EA made Origin, or Ubisoft made Uplay. It makes an awful lot of sense. So Phil obviously does want to continue to keep a platform, because that makes sense for them. And Ubisoft, well, I can certainly imagine you just having they wanting you to have some type of service on a device, which would be like Uplay, and then you could simply download a small executable or perhaps a small piece of game code, and then you simply stream from there. I do think eventually things are going to become more cloud orientated, but I think for at least the PlayStation 6, I don't think we're going to see hardware go anywhere. I could be wrong. But there's a couple of reasons for this. The first is that I don't think people are fully willing to embrace digital yet. I think that in the minds of a lot of people who are, let's say, 20-ish to 25, they still have some level of old school mentality where there's not enough of them who are willing to just say, I don't actually own any game, I'm just going to stream everything. There is that pleasure of actually owning a game. Yes, people are moving more towards digital, that's unquestionable, but that combined with the fact that not everyone has fast internet connections, particularly given that in some regions of America or even the world itself, you still have quite heavy bandwidth restrictions. The sheer amount of data that you need to shift to transfer a 4K image at high frame rates for the PlayStation 5, obviously we're going to see hardware, and I wouldn't be surprised if we also see it for the PlayStation 6. I just don't think we're quite ready to embrace it. However, 10 years time, that could be very different. And I wouldn't be surprised as well if we don't necessarily see a PlayStation 6. It could also be that it's more iterative. It could be more of a step up. How that works, it could be quite similar to how we've got the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One, or instead it could be more the iPhone or the Android philosophy. It'll be very curious. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Oh, and one last thing before I let you go. Thanks very much for the recent support and just all the comments and new subscribers. It means an awful lot to both Amy and myself. So, normal stuff. Like, share, comment and subscribe. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.